The Atlanta Braves brought back reliever Tyler Kinley in a very savvy financial move. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today, your source for daily news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, award-winning baseball writer and podcaster. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on X, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram as well. And you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. We're proudly part of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app or go to FanDuel.com to get started. The Braves did some stuff over the weekend, right? They made a bunch of transactions, most of them minor, right? Grabbing guys off waivers, DFAing some of the bench options for 2026. But they also made a signing on Saturday, conveniently after I had laid down for like a 3-hour nap, thanks AA. And they brought back Tyler Kinley. They acquired him last year from the Colorado Rockies right before the trade deadline and did the typical Atlanta thing. They had him start throwing his slider a lot more. He ended up being one of the better relievers down the stretch. Had a 0.72 ERA for Atlanta last year, 25 innings across 24 games. Just very, very good. 5 wins for the Braves. But they chose not to bring him back at the end of the season. And it ended up being a really good move. So when they got him from Colorado, he had a $5.5 million club option for 2026. And it was a little bit surprising to a lot of people that they turned it down and paid him $750,000 in a buyout to go to free agency. And I think some of the surprise was we knew Atlanta needed relievers. We saw what happened last year, right? And this was both Kinley and Pierce Johnson getting their options declined. I do think that the re-signing of Tyler Kinley shows that they were correct to decline that option when you look at the numbers of the deal. So it's a $3 million salary for 2026. And then there's a club option for 2027 of $5.5 million with a buyout of $1.25 million. So doing the math here, okay, they could have paid $5.5 million had they picked up the option to have Tyler Kinley for 2026. Instead, they're paying him $3 million in salary. They paid him a $750,000 buyout in November. And if they choose not to bring him back in 27, they have a $1.25 million buyout of that option, which means all of that added up is $5 million. So rather than pay him $5.5 million for 26 by picking up that option, they let him go to free agency. He saw his market. He came back to Atlanta. They saved $500,000 and got themselves an affordable club option for 27. They absolutely handled this right. As much as we, and by we, the royal we, Braves fans, kind of criticize the decision to let Pierce Johnson and let Tyler Kinley go in free agency, not pick up their options, Atlanta handled this right by letting Kinley go and bringing him back to a better deal. And news broke on Sunday that Pierce Johnson is signing with the Cincinnati Reds. And when you look at these two guys and what they do, like on the mound, their arsenals and how they use them, it makes sense to me that if you were going to bring back one of the two, it would be Tyler Kinley. From a pure pitching perspective, ignoring the clubhouse stuff, the longevity and tenure of Johnson being here longer than Kinley, all of that stuff. From a pure pitching perspective, it makes sense that you would bring back Tyler Kinley over Pierce Johnson. The big adjustment that each guy made when you acquired them is they started throwing their breaking balls a lot more. For Johnson, it was his curveball. For Kinley, it was the slider. But the difference in these two guys comes down to pitching coach Jeremy Hefner. What have we talked about we know about Jeremy Hefner? He likes guys who can throw multiple innings. He likes guys who have multiple pitches and are not just, two reliever or two pitch kind of guys that have 3, 4, 5, 6 options. Now, no reliever is going to be throwing, 7 pitches or so. But the idea for Hefner is he wants guys that throw a lot of strikes, they sequence well, and they've got multiple offerings. Here's the quote from Hefner that I kept going back to when I was looking him up and researching him when he first signed. Quote, hitting's hard, extremely hard. And then you've got to cover like 7 different pitches that are all really good. That feels like it's a really good plan for a pitcher to attack with. Again, neither Tyler Kinley nor Pierce Johnson have 7 pitches, but Pierce Johnson really has 1.5, and Tyler Kinley at least has a little bit more. So Pierce Johnson, last year, 72% curveball. He threw some four-seamers right about 95, and then he had a cutter that he used sporadically. That was all that Pierce Johnson did. I mean, he threw 968 pitches last year. 217 were fastballs, 53 were cutters, all the rest were curveballs. His most used pitch by far. And again, he upped it to the 70% when he got to Atlanta. Tyler Kinley, by comparison, has 4 pitches. Yes, he led with the slider, 64% usage last year overall. Four-seamer, 23%, 95 miles an hour. He's got decent velocity there, just like Johnson does. But he also throws a curveball 12% of the time, and he has a changeup. I say he has a changeup. He didn't use it a lot last year, literally threw 11 of them in 1,200 pitches, but he has multiple breaking balls, and he's better able to incorporate that third pitch than Pierce Johnson is. So, and I talked about this a little bit on social media last night. What Tyler Kinley does with his curveball. It had a 131 stuff plus, by the way. It's an absurd pitch. What he does with the curveball is he throws it early in the at-bat, and he almost always throws it for a ball. The idea is he wants to get ahead of you early. 0-1. He sometimes throws it on 1-1. 0-2, 1-2. He's getting ahead of you, and he's throwing that curveball because it's out of the zone. One, if you're sitting slider, he can put you away with the curveball. If you know Tyler Kinley is a slider guy, and his most commonly used pitch on every count but 3-0 is that slider. And that's common. Most guys throw fastballs on 3-0. That's just what happens. It's almost an auto take in baseball too. So they have to get me over fastball to get back in the count on 3-0. But for Kinley, if you're sitting slider, he puts you away with it. And if you're not sitting slider and you're trying to cover everything, or you're aware that he likes to go to a 2-strike curveball early and, when he's ahead, 0-2, 1-2, he doesn't throw a ton at 2-2 and he doesn't throw a ton at 3-2. Then, because the curveball is breaking below the zone, like they're close by velocity-wise. 83 to 87. They're remotely similar velocity-wise. But again, curveball early, below the zone, and then he throws the slider for a strike. So if you're aware of the tendency and you're watching for the curveball, he can get a called strike on the slider. If you're sitting slider, he can drop a curveball below your bat. Like he effectively uses his third pitch, unlike Pierce Johnson, who rarely uses that third pitch in the cutter that sits between the four-seamer and the curveball. So if looking at Jeremy Hefner and looking at what Jeremy Hefner likes to do likes his pitchers to do, it makes more sense that of the two, Atlanta would bring back Tyler Kinley over Pierce Johnson. Now, my big question here is, what does this mean for the bullpen, and how many guys could you possibly lose because they're out of options? We'll talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Alex Bregman went to the Cubs over the weekend, and because of it, you saw some of the odds a little bit different now. NL Central, they are favored to beat the Brewers. I'm pretty sure they were already there. But now when you look at National League teams to represent the NL in the World Series, Dodgers, Phillies still 1-2. Braves are right behind the Phillies. And then behind them, Mets, and then Cubs. I still kind of disagree that the Mets are so high. Just like I disagree in the American League that the Yankees should be the favorite right now. I think the Blue Jays should be the favorite. But remember, betting lines are not exclusively what's going to happen. They're also influenced by either the action of the public, how much money they're getting on these teams, or the action that they're looking to get because they're trying to rebalance their risk and all of that stuff. But either way, interesting that a lot of the betting lines have the Cubs jumping into this race now because they signed Alex Bregman, despite the fact he's not a great fit for that ballpark because it's so deep in Wrigley's left field corner and he's a pull-heavy hitter for his fly balls. It's one of the only ballparks that gets deeper in the corner, not shallower in the corner. Weird how they built Wrigley. But anyway, if you want to get in on some of this action, you think somebody's overpriced or underpriced, FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app today. It's really funny how this organization keeps messing up my newsletters from the week, right? And trying to be evergreen here. The Monday newsletter was all about Atlanta's lineup, right? Like what I think Atlanta can do with their lineup and how to configure it for the optimal run production and all of that stuff. But anyway, 3 different newsletters that I wrote last week were outdated by the weekend. Monday, we talked about the bullpen. Wednesday, we talked about the offseason spending and how you needed info on the medical reports for Joe Jimenez. And then we talked on Friday about the final bench spot. We talked about Vidal Brujan being DFA'd and how Brett Wisely was probably the favorite, but there's other options or things you could do with that. We'll talk about that some more in the third segment. But the thing that I find interesting now about this bullpen is you have so many guys back there who do not have options, but are legitimate candidates to make it. So right now, okay, there are guys that we know are absolute locks in this pen. Raisel Iglesias clearly is a lock. Robert Suarez is a lock. Dylan Lee as your lefty setup man is a lock, right? So Iglesias is your closer, Suarez as your right-handed setup man, Lee is your lefty. They're all locked in. I would argue middle relief, Tyler Kinley, it's only $3 million of salary plus that buyout, but I'd argue he's as close to locked in as you're going to get as well. I think after that, Joel Payamps and Aaron Bummer are the favorites for spots. I'm not going to say they're locked in. Aaron Bummer's making $9.5 million. If he's not locked into a spot, you got a problem. And remember, from a stuff perspective, from an inputs perspective, Aaron Bummer's been a fantastic reliever. The results just haven't been there. It's actually a very good test of how well somebody knows ball if they just reflexively say Aaron Bummer sucks or not. I do think that moving that $9.5 million would give Atlanta a bunch of options, financially, of things you could keep doing this winter. And I do think that they have enough bullpen talent to replace Aaron Bummer, but I understand why they're not aggressively trying to do that. Payamps is making $2.25 million. So again, not locked in. You do have another year of team control after this, and he does have a history of being really good. We broke this down on the newsletter 2 weeks ago. And so that's kind of your 4 through 6 in your bullpen. And so after that, right now, I've got Grant Holmes. He's your X factor here, right? We don't know what role he's going to have. Is he going to be a starter? Is he going to be in the pen? I do think utility pitcher, like what he did in 24, is probably the best place to use him. let him kind of go back and forth and, see what he can do. But you've got a bunch of options there. Joey Wentz, your long man. It can be Joey Wentz. It can be Jose Suarez, your third lefty out of the pen. I say that not knowing where Bryce Elder is going to be, but again, thinking that at this point, anybody who's optionable outside of Dylan Lee is probably going to start the year in Gwinnett. Hurston Waldrop is probably going to start the year in Gwinnett. He's optionable, and sending him down there gives you the ability to add another starter to your rotation and preserve that depth. Is it Bryce Elder? Is it Grant Holmes? Assuming there's not a trade, it's probably going to be Elder as your 5 with Waldrop and Gwinnett and Holmes in your bullpen. Now, again, I know people are screaming about Bryce Elder. He's got to show more consistency. I'm hoping Jeremy Hefner can help with that. But the point I'm trying to make here is your bullpen is incredibly overloaded because I still haven't mentioned James Karinchak, right? Who signed a minor league deal last month or November, I think. Looks to be as close to back as he's been. Ian Hamilton, formerly of the Yankees. He's been very, very good in the past. He backed off of throwing his slider more than half the time. He was kind of sticking back to one fastball over multiple fastballs and all of that. Daysabel Hernandez is an option. Hunter Stratton's an option. Dylan Dodd apparently has another option. We thought he was out. Fangraphs updated that just recently. So, you've got a lot of options here of guys that you can start off not having them in the pen, but putting them in here later for maximum flexibility, okay? Again, Dodd's optionable. Gwinnett. Daysabel's optionable. There we go. Hard word to say sometimes. So, in Gwinnett. Hunter Stratton. 2 options left in Gwinnett. Hayden Harris, clearly, he's optionable in Gwinnett. The guys that you have, Karinchak is not on the 40-man roster, and he's also optionable. So you can either put him in Gwinnett right away, or you can start him in Gwinnett. And, you have options there. Danny Young is going to be put on the 60-day IL as he's working on coming back from Tommy John surgery. So you can get him into the season and deal with him. He does have an option. You can deal with him during the season. So many of these guys can be sent to AAA. And as much as we want to think it's going to come down to performance and to whoever is the best, AA does not like to willingly give up depth. George Soriano, they grabbed him off of waivers. He's on the 40-man roster, and he's not optionable. He's out of options. He's a guy that they're willing to lose off of waivers, or they're going to give him a shot to earn a role in the pen on opening day. But it's just a bullpen without a lot of flexibility, and that's what's going to hurt. Because at some point in time, you're going to have to make a move. And there's nobody in your bullpen that you can option but Dylan Lee. And we saw in 24, they had to do that late in the year, and they hated it. He hated it. It did not go well. They brought him up as soon as they could. And because MLB's made it harder to use the phantom IL, right, to put guys on the injured list for injuries that you can't show medical reports to the league office to validate, it's harder to just stash a guy on the IL for 2 weeks so that you can have a roster spot for him either. We'll see what happens. It's entirely possible you move some of these guys in spring training. Some of these guys won't make it through spring training with the team. They'll get cut, they'll get released, whatever it might be. But I do wonder if signing Tyler Kinley now was either a function of he had a deal somewhere else, and we either needed to sign him or lose him, or B, if they already got that pending medical report on Joe Jimenez. We assumed it was going to be something around spring training of what the outlook would be for Joe Jimenez. Maybe they got a report in early January that said, hey, Jimenez is probably not going to be ready to start the season. And they said, well, we need one more leverage reliever that we know. And so now your top 4 are all either proven in the majors, like Robert Suarez, or guys Iglesias, Lee, and Kinley. And then behind them, you can build the back half of the plane out of some combination of Aaron Bummer and Joel Pyomps and Grant Holmes and Karen Chack and all of these other guys. We haven't gotten anything from the organization, from AA, anything like that on the status of Joe Jimenez. And it's possible that this signing was not in reaction to Jimenez getting a bad medical report or having some sort of struggles. We just don't know. But we do know that Atlanta was looking for some sort of medical update after the first of the year to know the status of Jimenez. So again, we don't know if it's connected. I'm wondering if it is. As soon as we find out anything, whether official from the team or something from, Jimenez's camp or whatever, his agent, whatever, I'll pass it along. But if Joe Jimenez is available to start the season, this may be the best bullpen Atlanta's had. Like, you have to remember when Joe Jimenez last pitched in, at this rate in 2024, he was absolutely phenomenal. That StatCast page for Joe Jimenez in 2024 is one of the reddest StatCast pages I have ever seen. The only thing that he's not in the 80th or better percentile in is fastball velocity. He averaged just under 95. Walk rate, he was right around league average. And ground ball rate, he was right around league average. Everything else was phenomenal. 91st percentile in barrel rate, 91st percentile in hard hit rate, 90th percentile in strikeout rate, 93rd percentile in whiff rate, 88th percentile in chase rate. Like, everything was phenomenal as a slider, four-seam changeup guy. If you do have Joe Jimenez back, you bump somebody. You probably, I don't know if you bump a Pyomps, if you trade a Bummer, you bump Wentz out of there and Holmes is your long man. I don't know, but that's probably the best bullpen you've had under AA this decade. I am curious, this is also the best bench I think you've had. I am curious about the last spot on the roster. We saw them DFA some guys late last week. We'll talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. Last up in the Braves Today, Lindsay Crosby. Do me a favor, if you're enjoying the content that we do, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube page or the audio, wherever you're getting the podcast from. But also, BravesToday.com. A lot of the content so far in the last couple weeks has been different every day in the newsletter than on the podcast. And so, again, today's newsletter was all about how to configure the roster around Ronald Acuna Jr., kind of ran some models on what gave you the most runs, tweaked those models to not do weird stuff like having Drake Baldwin batting 8th, and just tried to figure out the best way to deploy the lineup next year. So again, BravesToday.com, free or paid, helps us out a ton. It's different content than here at the podcast. But talking about the last guy on the roster, they DFA'd Vidal Brujan late last week when they grabbed Ken Waldichuk off of waivers. And I was excited about this one. I thought Ken Waldichuk was going to be a fun one to talk about. He's a lefty, former top prospect of the Yankees, was traded to the Athletics, and was not good. Then he had Tommy John surgery. And so part of me wonders, which is he has multiple minor league options available. Was the plan to just 60-day him? And if he came back during the season, go ahead and send him down and keep him in there, all of that kind of stuff. And then they turned around, they grabbed George Soriano from the Orioles, another pitcher, and they DFA'd Brett Wisely. And then they DFA'd Waldichuk when they signed Tyler Kinley. So I was going to write about Waldichuk, and I'm glad I didn't get it done because it would have been outdated almost immediately. That happened with Ryan Rollison. I wrote about Ryan Rollison and the challenges of making him a good pitcher again for Jeremy Hefner and then they waived him like a week later. But now I'm starting to wonder what's going to happen with the final spot on the bench. Because Vidal Brujan and Brett Wisely were both out of options, and they're both infield, outfield, flexible guys that don't hit really well, but give you defensive versatility and some of that other stuff. Wisely was a 15th rounder in 2019. He was waived by San Francisco late last year. Atlanta grabbed him and used him a couple times at second base after Ozzie went down. It was like him and Nick Allen took that spot together. Brujan, at the same time, they grabbed him off of waivers, and he played a little bit of outfield. He played a little bit of infield. He also does not hit well. He was a former top prospect of the Rays. Funny how that worked out. They're both gone now. And so there's a couple options in AAA, and everybody's asking for Nacho Alvarez to be the guy. And I think at this point, if you're a believer in Nacho Alvarez, and I'm not convinced yet that you should be, because we haven't seen his AAA performance carry over to the majors. If you're a believer in Nacho Alvarez, you should want him to be in Gwinnett to play every day. I've heard people say that they think he's not a shortstop. Let's be clear. He is not a shortstop. But I've seen people say that they think he can learn second base and be the successor to Ozzie Albies. I'd put him as probably a second division regular at best over a first division guy. Like, I don't think he's the starting second baseman on a contending team. He's batting like 8th or 9th. I don't think he's, that guy for you. But if you think that Nacho Alvarez can be the next second baseman of the Atlanta Braves, you should want him in Gwinnett playing every day. Because if you sit on the bench, think about what Nacho Alvarez would bring you off the bench. Okay? If your lineup has Baldwin behind the plate and Yastrzemski in left with Profar at DH, if you need a pinch runner, it's going to be Eli White. If you need a defensive replacement, it's going to be Mauricio Dubon. If you need a big bat to maybe get a home run for you, it's going to be Sean Murphy when he's healthy and back. What's the use case for Nacho Alvarez on the bench? Like, if you're going to have the guy there, have a job for him. You saw this a lot last year with Orlando Arcia, right? When Nick Allen took over for Orlando Arcia barely got into the game because there was nothing that he did better than your other options. He wasn't fast, so he wasn't a pinch running option. He wasn't a great hitter. They didn't use his bat that much for a pinch hit thing. And defensive replacement, they had other guys who were better defenders than him. You rarely saw him enter the game because he wasn't very good, and they eventually just DFA'd him. He ended up joining the Colorado Rockies and playing a bunch of second and first and stuff. So you've got a couple guys in the minors. Aaron Schunk was a Rockies second-round pick in 2019 out of UGA. He's spent a majority of his time at third, but he's played all across the infield. It's a minor league deal, but he has a non-roster invite to spring training. He might be the guy that they go with. Jim Jarvis, they acquired him in the Rafael Montero trade with the Tigers, 11th round pick in 2023 out of University of Alabama. He was mostly a shortstop at Alabama, and in the minors, he's played some second, he's played some third. He made some swing adjustments in the Arizona Fall League that helped him elevate the ball more and kind of get more power and things like that. He's probably another guy you need to keep in Gwinnett and play every day. And so I'm really kind of wondering, do you go sign a guy? When I wrote this newsletter last week, one of our premium subscribers said Jorge Mateo, which I've been a big Jorge Mateo guy for a while. He's played shortstop, he's played center field, he's incredibly fast. It is kind of, he'd be your third option at shortstop, and he would be maybe tied for pinch running option with Eli White. So I don't know how much utility he brings. I could see somebody arguing for another catcher so that if you play Drake Baldwin at DH, you don't potentially lose your catcher if there's an injury to Sean Murphy. Reminder on how this works real quick. I've talked about this a few times, I think. If your DH has to leave the DH spot and go to a defensive position, you can't put a new DH into the game. You just lose a designated hitter. And every time that spot comes up, either the pitcher has to hit or you have to send in a pinch hitter. That is the rule. So if you carry a third catcher, Sandy Leon, something like that, that would give you the ability to have both everyday catchers in the lineup and know that if, say, Sean Murphy were to go down in the fourth inning, you could stick Sandy Leon in there to finish the game and not have to worry about running pinch hitters out there every couple innings as the DH spot came up. Because eventually you could run out of pinch hitters. It's very rare. I don't remember the last time I saw the third catcher have to enter a game because of an injury, but that's an option. I will also point out there could be an option if the money's right? 5 million, 8 million, something small. The Braves could talk about bringing back Marcell Ozuna. Walt Weiss has said, we're not doing a full-time DH, but he would give you the ability, if you need a big bat off the bench, if you need a professional at-bat late in a game, Marcell Ozuna would give it to you, assuming he's healthy from his hip injury, and that's something you would have to find out. He would give you the ability to get a veteran bat. He's fantastic in the Braves clubhouse. All the guys love him. Pitching, like pitchers and hitters alike. And if a catcher or an outfielder went down, you could fill the DH spot full time with Marcell Ozuna. You're not going to play him in the outfield. That ship has sailed. I don't know if he even owns any gloves anymore. They even took the first base glove away from him. But let's say you were to lose Sean Murphy, or you were to lose Jurickson Profar. Yeah, here we go. You lose Jurickson Profar. And so now your everyday outfield and left field is some combination of Yastrzemski, White, and Dubon. Because Dubon is good against lefties and can play anywhere. Your DH spot on an everyday basis or near everyday basis could be Marcell Ozuna. I'm not saying to sign Marcell Ozuna, and the money clearly does matter. But not having a favorite right now for that final spot on the bench, that 13th bench spot, I don't think it's a big deal because it gives you flexibility. You could also have an AA special and wait to see who comes open late in spring training. We signed Adam Duvall with a week and a half left in spring training. It didn't end well, but the process could be something that Atlanta tries to go again. Maybe that's when you get Ozuna. You get Ozuna late in spring, get him for super cheap. Again, he's 1 year removed from a fourth place MVP finish. He had a couple seasons where he was close to a 40, 100 year for you. So, a lot of different options. It's probably not going to be Brett Wisely. It may or may not be Vidal Brujan. Could be Aaron Schunk. Could be somebody not in the organization. We'll see what happens. This has been Braves Today for Monday, January 12th. Thank you for working with me on this voice. I don't know what's going on. I just all of a sudden started having vocal issues on Sunday afternoon. But we'll see it on audio. 5-star reviews would be fantastic. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and obviously go subscribe over at bravestoday.com. I got a lot of fun things planned for the newsletter this year. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.